Good morning. Good morning, world. Here I am. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Duggars, and not just the Duggars, but this whole theology that drives guys like Josh to have these kind of weird, warped ideas about, sexuality. If you don't know me, I'm Suzanne Titkemeyer. I wrote for Pathos for almost 10 years, a column called No Longer Quivering that has to do with the Quiverfull movement of evangelicalism, partially fundamentalism. What made me think about starting this today is this morning I got up and someone I know, Sheila Ray Gregory, who was a friend of mine, was promoting her book on sexuality yet again. She's got The Great Sex Rescue is the name of the book. And the book is really, I've read it. It's very excellent. She talks about pretty much all aspects of sexuality and all the bad messages that have been picked up in the churches and spread that have really wrecked people's lives. They've wrecked their sex lives. I mean, they don't have the kind of fun that everybody outside is having. Hey, Carolyn, they wrecked that completely. And there are so many negative messages that the church has embedded into sexuality. So that's what I want to talk about today, because Sheila Gregory was talking about modesty, and I had to respond and say, but Sheila, you could be wearing a potato sack loosely all over, covered from head to toe, not 1 inch of your skin showing, and somewhere some man would still be lusting over you. That's one thing that the internet has done for me that I never realized. I never realized before until I left my little CULT church that there were so many different types of sexuality out there, that people have desires for all kinds of crazy things that for me seem kind of wrong, but maybe for them they're right. I've learned not to judge about those things, let people figure out whatever it is they want, unless they're involving other people against their will, or other people who are under the age of 18, or animals. All that's a no-go for me. But I learned after years on the internet and after leaving that anything super weird you could think of, somebody somewhere has made porn for it. Example, we were in New Orleans in March on vacation, sort of, taking care of some things like trying to get documents for our residency here, trying to get an apostille stamp. So anyway, we're in New Orleans. One day we're driving around mid-city and came across this rather large sex toy shop. Now we went in there just to see what they had, take a look around and everything. Didn't realize until we walked in that it was actually a porn theater, that they had the movie going in the back, and they had the guys in raincoats sliding in to go to the theater in the back, and God knows what. I don't even want to think about them and their self-molestation, but I'm sure that's what was going on. So it was interesting because I was looking around this place in Mid-City, and name a subject and they would have a film for it. They had DVDs that were selling. Japanese milkmaids being tickled by guys in Nazi uniforms. They would have had that. They had all kinds of just really bizarre stuff. Hey, I know that this is going to be demonetized, and I don't care. There's sometimes we have to talk about these things. So whatever the weirdness of the porn that you liked, no matter how strange and weird, this place had it. They had literally everything. And I was kind of laughing over some of it, because some of it was bizarre. And I guess I grew up in New Orleans, in the New Orleans area. And this was not one of those nice, clean shops that you see on Bourbon Street for the tourists. This was the hardcore, weird stuff. Including, I had never seen anything like this. Sex toys with diameters like this. Like, I'm looking at that. At one point, I'm looking in that cabinet with all those, and I'm looking, I'm like, unshockable, unflappable me has been shocked. And the nice young African American man working behind the counter looks at me and says, white people be freaky. I laughed so hard when he said that because there's a lot of truth to that. And here's the thing, I think that people who are very religious are the freakiest of all. Why do I say that? Because of the way that they handle sexuality. It's not a coincidence that Josh Duggar was caught with the worst of the worst of the worst of the porn and the child porn. Why? Well, because of the purity culture, modesty culture that is pushed in evangelical and and fundamentalism. It gets pushed to the point where you start looking at it going, okay, so that's where that came from. The top porn searches are in the most conservative states. Yes, Java Man, I've seen that many a times, and I've laughed over that. And some of the things that they search for are really bizarre. I've looked at that too, and there's just something about conservatism that goes hand in hand with weird porn taste. I don't know what that is. I'm guessing because sexuality is always completely suppressed in all these people. I'm guessing. But I do know that, like, if you watch the Duggar show, and they are very close to how it was treated in my old fundamentalist Quiverfull church. The parents were flaunting their sexuality. Every time you turned around on the show, you'd see Jim Bob Duggar coming up behind his wife to hump her ass and just stupid stuff like that. And this is pushed in the face of these kids. I don't know much, but I know that when kids reach a certain age, when those sex hormones start kicking in, they start going into that zone where they're having those thoughts, those feelings, and everything else. And if they are part of a well, I'm going to go out and say it because I know I'm going to be demonetized, a cult church, if they're part of a cult church that teaches that all sexual thought is sin, all of it, all of it, all of it, these are the things that happen. If you are told that the things, hey, T. King, methinks they do protest too much. Oh, yes. And hey, Bliss Chris, they're deprived. You always want what you can't have. When they went golfing, oh, yes, that's the exact episode where he came up behind her and was humping her. I was like, oh, my God, why are you doing that? So they teach this thing, this modesty culture, that all sexual thought is sinful without allowing for any kind of safe valve for these young women and men that are coming to their sexual maturity as teens usually. There's no outlets. All sexual thought is sinful. Masturbation is sinful. All of that is sinful, 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 sinful. So, no outlet and a sin. So, what do you think? Do you think that they're becoming more holy with every day being taught that? No, it just forces them to go underground. Underground. And I've talked about this at NLQ a number of times. I've written a pile of posts at No Longer Quivering where I've been accused of being a Josh defender because I explained in great detail how modesty culture, purity culture drives this exact kind of behavior. Now, not everybody involved in this is going to end up starring in porn with a little person and a goat and a pile of weird toys. No, I'm not saying that at all. But even having a crush is sinful. That's exactly right, Laura, because they want you to only have those feelings for whoever your father has picked out for you to have in courtship and go straight to marriage. You're supposed to save those feelings for that. And it's human nature to have crushes. I was explaining the other day that when I was 12, it was Donny Osmond. It was like I was ready to sign up to be a Mormon and moved to Utah and married Donny Osmond at 12. That's a normal behavior. Having crushes are normal on people you know, people you don't know. Oh Lordy, I remember all the crushes I had on the boys in my middle school. It's a huge pile. And to say that's sinful is just crazy. I mean, it's just part of natural development. You start with your crushes on the unattainable because it's a safe way to explore feelings of romance and sexuality and to think about those things. And then you move on to what's in your real life and start experiencing that and start gaining a little bit of knowledge, experience, and perspective. It really needs to happen when with kids, and parents really need to be very relaxed about this. I still get crushes. I'm 61 and I still get them every now and then, but they're more like, I'm looking at your big brain crushes. I will not ever not have a crush on Weird Al. Smart and funny is my turn on. So they deny all of that. And if you have these crushes while you're older and married, you're sinning, according to them, double, because you're having some kind of weird mental adultery. And I used to subscribe to that notion. I was so into this at one point that if I was online on Facebook, before Facebook, on ICQ, does anyone remember ICQ? ICQ, Yahoo Messenger, all these early things, AOL, and a man messaged me to try to have one of those conversations, try to flirt with me, I would always self-righteously post, sorry, I do not have conversations with other men. I'm happily married. Please don't disrespect my marriage by trying to have a conversation with me. They seem to be afraid of what in 1984 is called a thought crime. Java Man, they are, and they teach this thought crime stuff pretty hard. Like I said, you can't have crushes, not when you're young, not when you're older. It's a type of infidelity, according to them. And they say that it opens the door for all these bad things. Yet at the same time, I have to laugh because one of the female enforcers that I follow, whose name I won't mention because she's a little on the crazy side to the point where her husband likes to PM me and accuse me of all kinds of things. So I try not to ever mention her name now. She used to post all the time about these wonderful Hallmark movies she was watching and how great they were and blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm not a Hallmark movie watcher, just like I'm usually not a Lifetime movie watcher, because I think that they show an unrealistic view of life. And the thing they show the most that's so unrealistic is that they show a very romantic, unrealistic view. And most of the movies are exactly the same. They follow a formula. Girl leaves big career, comes back to hometown, falls in love with first boyfriend who's now a carpenter and decides that her evil life in the city is no good and she's happy being the wife of a simple carpenter in Podunk, Idaho, or wherever. And that's not a bust on Idaho. Idaho is fabulous, but I'm just saying, I'm just coming up with a very rural place. I know you're talking about the George Orwell book, and you're talking about the movie that was made, the horrifying movie that was made around that same time. I forgot who starred in it, but I saw it and was just like, I do not want to live in that kind of future at all. And 1984 has a lot in common with The Handmaid's Tale, which I have been watching religiously since it came out. And The Handmaid's Tale has a kind of punishments that I think that this type of Christianity is eager, happy, and martyr baiting over. They're like drilling on this for various things, including having a crush. Does anybody remember when Nick's wife developed kind of a crush relationship with another of the guardians? They executed them for it. Good morning. Hey, Irina Rue. So they executed the two of them for having what essentially was a crush. I mean, if you haven't, well, except they did run off at the end to be together. But that's what happens when you try to manage other people's sexuality like that. It goes and their sexuality and their feelings of romance. It goes into some really strange places. And this female cultural enforcer, she really has a very different view of sexuality and everything. She's given a lot of times advice on her blog that if you have those feelings, I mean, you don't have those feelings for your husband, the sex should always be, she describes it like a chore. 5 minutes in lube, 5 minutes in lube. Now, I'm not saying there aren't going to be those times when you're going to do 5 minutes in lube because you're in a hurry and you don't have time for the whole enchilada, but to say that it is always 5 minutes in lube is pretty far out there, and it's part of this whole problem. Because sex in a relationship is really one of the most important things you can. I mean, it better work. Let's just put it that way. And if it doesn't work, you better find a therapist, a sex therapist, and get some kind of sex therapy. But if you do like the modesty culture police do, and you deny it all the way, then you have guys like I singled out Josh Duggar because his case, I think, is a really good example of this. Josh got caught as a young teenager touching his sisters inappropriately, and his parents lied about what it actually was. Oh, it can be lots of fun, Rena. I'm not dissing that. That has its place. Quickies have their place. All of that has its place, but it shouldn't be the main event, if you get what I'm saying. I really don't want to get kicked off YouTube, so I'm not going to use the actual terms, even though I know this video will be not monetized because I've already said masturbation, sexuality. I've said all those things, and I'm going to keep saying them because I think they're important things to say. So Josh started out with normal curiosity, but he was already so warped by the modesty culture his parents had been preaching since day one that he decided to settle that by observing touching his own sisters in very inappropriate ways. I'm not going to go into that because I know that Without a Box of Kleenex covered exactly what happened, every action, and that's just kind of gross. And it went from there. He got caught with porn again and again and again. Supposedly, the rumor is he got caught looking at porn on Jim Holt's campaign computers, and it ended his courtship with Holt's daughter. It ended the friendship between the Holts and the Duggars for the most part. Josh was caught again and again with porn, is what my understanding was. There's rumors that he fixed and gave away computers of the families or his to friends, and they were filled with weird porn. Every time that something happens with Josh, it's an escalation. So if you have that kind of beginning, like I said, it's one thing to try and peek and see what the opposite sex has. But if you're raised in a really, really, really repressive, all sexuality, all thought of sexuality before marriage is a sin. It's easy to find yourself going from paying the little girl down the street a nickel to look at her stuff to finding yourself filming a porn with a walrus and a dominatrix and all kinds of weird stuff. I mean, that's a big spectrum, but we're looking at where Josh is and where he started with normal curiosity that was not a sin. It's not a sin to want to look and see and ask those questions. Most people will start asking those questions with their parents. I remember when my son was 3, he asked me who cut off my penis, which led to our first conversation on sexuality. I mean, you have to have those conversations with your kids or you're doing them a serious disservice. Part of me feels really bad for Josh. He begged for help, but received almost none. I believe in prayer, but prayer doesn't meet the needs that Josh had. I really do have sympathy for him as a child. I do too. And when I say those things, people will tell you, oh, you're an excuser of what Josh did. No, I'm not an excuser at all of what Josh did. But I feel like we can lay a lot of what he did at least the beginning, at the feet of his parents. If they hadn't have made it such a huge sin, if they had just talked to him, gotten him help when he took the inappropriate actions of touching his sisters, instead of trying to minimize it to their world, their church, this world, and everything else, if they'd have gotten him help, I don't know if it would have done any good, but I think we probably wouldn't be where we are now. I just have to believe that. But you also have to understand, in their world, they do not believe in secular counselors for anything. They only believe in Christian counselors, and I don't know that many good Christian counselors. There are some out there. I've been to some. But at the same time, there are a whole pile of bad ones. I've told the story many a time about the one my husband went to, told him that his depression was because I wasn't submissive enough, which was not it at all. It turned out he had a tumor on his parathyroid gland. So Josh tried to do what he could as a child to figure this out. And when he went into puberty, which we all go through, we all have those feelings. We all start thinking about that stuff during puberty. Instead of having a trusted friend or family member or parent he could talk to about these things, it was all, that's a sin. So he picked that up, and that's why we've seen such a horrible escalation with everything he has done. So part of me does have sympathy for that. I mean, this is unnecessary, everything that happened. Normal curiosity, according to the witness statement from Mrs. Holt. Yeah, I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about before that, because before that happened, he would have had normal curiosity and would have probably tried to look at his sisters and stuff. That was inappropriate. What was really inappropriate is his parents covered that and tried to pretend it was the normal curiosity of looking with the occasional touch. That's what his parents tried to pretend it was, and that's gross. And I think it's also gross that a certain person went into it in great detail on her YouTube channel. I don't think that benefits anybody to read those complete reports with every single stupid little action. As an adult, there's zero excuse for him, but as a child, he was incredibly neglected by his parents. His needs were neglected and ignored. Yes, they were. And he's not the only one. Look at the Williams brothers. Look at Caleb and his brother who worked for Josh. They both have had sexual abuse charges brought against him. I believe one or more of them had gone to jail for it. They're all being raised in this hyper modesty lifestyle, and they're all acting out in that weird way. She's not sufficiently obedient to her husband. Not a big fan of the germ theory, disease transmission. Java man, not only do they believe that she's not submissive enough to her husband, they will tell you that you brought it on yourself, not just by not being submissive. They will tell you that you have secret sin in your life that you have not properly confessed. I had firsthand experience of this because when I was 32, my asthma came back. I had asthma as a child rather severely that went away when I was 14, that came back when I was 32. And it came back just standard. It wasn't crazy asthma like I have now. And anytime I mentioned I had asthma, I got the same reaction that I had earlier from a YouTube commenter. It's like, you're the most self-focused, selfish person in the world. Except they added in that I was giving glory to the devil by admitting I had symptoms. I brought this on myself by A, not being submissive enough, and B, having some kind of secret, unconfessed sin that gave the devil the carte blanche he needed to make me ill. Not one discussion about the fact that I've been raised in the shadow of Exxon's main refinery in the entire world. Not one conversation about the fact that there were people in my family that dealt with mast cell. None of that. It was always my fault. Like everything else in Quiverfull, it's always the woman's fault. Always, always, always. When we went to leave our church, it was my fault because I should have kept my husband there with enough submission and praying and everything else. If I'd have been the right kind of woman, he wouldn't have left. I'm praying your channel blows up this year. Not sure if this is what you want, but you're absolutely oh, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Here's the thing. I thought I was done talking about this. When I quit writing No Longer Quivering, November 1999, November 2000, not in 1999, November 2020. Man, my dates are really mixed up. I had been doing it over 10 years if you counted the time that I was working on my own before we got picked up by Pathos. I've been doing it a long, long time, and it was a big part of my own healing to be able to talk about these things. It still is. I'm still on that journey, that continuum. So I had a pretty big bully pulpit at No Longer Quivering. I did. But I was just burned out because I posted every day for years. Years. And my husband can tell you, with vacation, gotta post, gotta write, gotta write, gotta write. And writing sometimes took time. Sometimes you would have to research, pull your statistics, try to back up what you were saying. Occasionally you get it wrong. Your commenters would let you know how wrong you got it. And then you'd have to say, I'm sorry, I was completely wrong about that thing. So I thought I was done with ever talking about Quiverfull ever again. But you can thank Katie Joy. You can thank her for me coming on and talking about this stuff, because correcting some of the crap she was saying let me know that there was still a need to be talking about these things. And don't get me wrong, I'm not putting down Fundy Friday. I think Jen does an excellent job. But Jen just skims the surface because that's all she can really do in her little limited time frame. Whereas I have lived this. I understand this theology inside and out. So I'm trying to take a deep dive and really look hard at it. And I may start going to Instagram for these things that I know that YouTube is going to frown on, like the things I'm saying today. This was a pretty big thing for me, leaving. And I talked about this the other day. And this is not just me, this is everybody I know who's left this kind of religion, this high demand religious organization stuff. Your journey, it takes years. I know people who've been out 25, 30 years who still struggle with some things. It's not you think about linear thinking. It's like this, straight line, straight line. Recovery is not like that. Recovery from a high demand religious organization is not like that. It's more like, it's like climbing hills and mountains. Example, you come out, you don't have good boundaries. I didn't even realize how bad my boundaries were until I got bruised up one time, 3 or 4 years out, getting a sonogram to see if I had gallstones. I should have said something. Who knew? I didn't know I was at that point. So for me talking about this, it actually does help me as well. So I started because of one thing. I'm continuing on because I realize it needs to happen. There needs to be these kind of conversations. So if the channel blows up or not, it's all good. It's all good. So that's why I have compassion for Josh as a child. I've seen where this goes. I've told this story before, and I want to tell it again and it's in my book too that I'm working on. We used to have these huge conferences at my old church. I used to love them because I was on worship team, and we would have, I love them, but I loathe them at the same time. Let me rephrase that, because I would be Friday morning, Friday afternoon, Friday evening services, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening service, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening service. That's 9 times singing over 3 days. And ministering. It was just a lot. It was a lot. And thank God I had the energy for it then. Today that would kill me. Spam bot. Yeah, I see the spam bot. I wasn't even paying attention. Let's kill you because this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So a lot of Josh's actions make me think he wanted to be caught. Yeah, I wonder about that too. I think it was a cry for help that he wouldn't get from his family. He's not stupid. I think he knew what he was doing. I think so too, Laura. And I think it's unfortunate that none of the adults in his life picked up on that and got him help. I was told if we would have prayed harder, my sweet nephew would have lived after he was born with half a heart. Yeah, that sounds right, Ping Dana. That sounds like a lot of people I know. Yeah, she will have to just buy more of them, most definitely. And I'm happy that Emily D. Baker is going to surpass KJ, I think. I'm working my way out of a 23-year narc relationship. It often sounds similar to leaving. Yeah, it does. It's very similar. And coincidentally, with these kinds of cults and high demand religious organizations, you will find a lot of narcissists heading them up, a tremendous amount. I'm not going to say that my former pastor was a narcissist because I don't think he was, but I think he was as hurting and messed up as the rest of us, because he's really had a fall from grace through the years. He used to fat shame us and weigh us on worship team, is now rather rotund and angry and various things, and thrown out of at least one church for financial shenanigans. So anyway, back to that. We'd have these huge conferences, and I enjoyed them. We would get so many people in, but at the same time, it was a hard time because I had my family I was trying to take care of. I still had to cook and clean and do all those things that if you're a fundamentalist and or evangelical Christian woman, you must do. So I was doing all that and doing all this on the side. So we'd have the big conferences on all kinds of different things, on healing, on demon busting, on all kinds of different subjects. Sometimes I agreed. Sometimes I was sitting there back there trying not to roll my eyes, thinking, this is the biggest pile of dookie I've seen in a long time. One time we had some type of deliverance ministry thing with this other church in, I was North or South Carolina. Wilmington, North Carolina. Is that it? They were in Wilmington. That much I know. They came and did, quote, deliverance ministry. And you've heard me talk about deliverance ministry before. What a complete pile of steaming horse shit that is. It just is. It's blaming people for their own needs, wants, and the things that happen to them, their illnesses. It's blaming people for their very being. Small town Joel, I'm sorry, getting a notification. I don't know. I jumped on last second. I will say that. I didn't give anybody much notice, but I'm going to start doing better about that. But I started thinking about this morning because I ran across Sheila Ray Gregory's promotion for her book yet again, The Great Sex Rescue, which I said, excellent book, recommended. I'm going to leave a link in the description below because it is one of the really good ones. Another good one, if you're leaving a high demand organization, is called When Bad Christians Happen to Good People. I'll leave that one in there too. That's very, very helpful. Oh, wow. Ginger Lee. Yeah, that is a tough one. So have you thought about maybe getting together with Jen from Fundy Fridays? I'd absolutely love to see some type of collaboration. I know it's probably difficult with your mask self. I haven't really thought about that because she does the whole makeup thing and all that stuff. And I like what she does, but I don't know if we could do a collaboration or not. Maybe that might be something I might have to approach her about. But here we go. This kid was at this deliverance ministry thing. And the deliverance ministry thing seemed pretty stupid to me, even though I didn't know, but 3 months later I was going to be drug off to this by my husband. And it was not a good situation. So this family got up, this sweet and lovely family that I knew with an Italian last name that I'm not going to spew out because I don't want to identify them because I don't know what they're doing now. They may be out or in or who knows. They were a family I loved. They had a pile of children. They had an interesting backstory. The husband had married the wife when she was pregnant with her first child by her first husband after her first husband was killed. And so they had this really sweetness about the family, and their story was a good one. I'll see if I can. I'm gonna see. I'll see. I'll see if I can do that. Um, so the sweet family was going on. They were all getting up and talking about the things they'd been delivered from that day. And some of it was some pretty standard evangelical things like delivery from the fear of judgment from other people, delivery from performance anxiety to deal with other people, um, breaking the chains of the must do's and just stuff like that. Just really general out there stuff that we were all saying. It was really common. And then their 14-year-old son got up. Now, this is a kid that had said no more than 10 words to me the entire years they were at that church. And I was involved with teen ministry at that point, too, working with the teen youth worship team and various things. So I had interactions with this kid, but he never said much of anything. I just thought he was real shy. So he got up and started talking about the thing he'd been delivered from. He had been delivered from masturbation and porn, and he talked about it in great, horrible detail. He talked about his favorite titty sites, he called it. He talked about imagining the Sunday school teacher without her clothes. He talked about it in the kind of disgusting detail that made, like I said, when he first started, I wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. Before it was over with, I wanted the floor to open up and swallow all of us so we didn't have to listen to him anymore. This child was talking about very normal feelings of development and sexuality, like it was the worst sin in the world. He talked about his porn habits, about how many porn mags he had to burn and to take a rock to his laptop and stuff. And I was just sitting there horrified listening to this. Oh, does she go live? I'll have to think about it. I'll have to see if I can. So this kid was just, he was just going on and on and on and on and on and on. And this probably went on about 10, 15 minutes, I think, at least. I kept looking over at the pastor because normally when we had these things happen where somebody would jump up and give some kind of testimony, words of knowledge, prayer that was inappropriate, the pastor would cue up the worship team and away we'd go. Our God is an awesome God. We would just go on and drown the person out, frankly. But I kept looking over at him and he just kept letting the kid go on and on and on and on and on. And it was the most uncomfortable, wrong thing I've ever sat through. When we went home that afternoon, my preteen son and I had a long conversation about this. My daughter was younger and didn't quite get what was going on. And I was like, you don't need to know yet. And I just wanted to go up to that kid and say, kid, everything you're feeling is normal and natural. But I knew his parents well enough to know if I did that, it would be horrible. The lid would blow off. I'd get called on the carpet. Not like I didn't already get called on the carpet sometimes. It had gotten to the point towards the end there that if the pastor said, hey, I need to talk to you for a few minutes before the service started, and unlocked his office door, I was like, oh shit, what did I do now? A lot of times it was really stupid stuff. Like the time that we were doing a prayer night and we started doing worship and we started doing fire tunnels. I'll explain about fire tunnels at some other point. And those of us with Montauk sticks were pounding them on the ground. And I had just had a hysterectomy. It's like less than a week after my hysterectomy, my total hysterectomy. And so, of course, I couldn't stand and pound the Montauk stick very long. I handed it off to somebody else. Well, apparently I handed it off to the wrong somebody else. The pastor had a problem with that. So I got called on the carpet. It was just stupid, petty stuff all the time. All the time, all the time. So when you put yourself under anybody's authority like that, it can go seriously weird. You really have to stop and think about what you're doing on a regular basis. And raising children in this was difficult because, like I said, even then I knew some of the stuff that we were doing and saying was just very wrong. And behind the scenes, I was telling my kids, don't listen to this, don't do this. For things like tearing up those Pokemon cards and setting them on fire because they had demons in them, or the kid that cried masturbate thing and his porn usage, telling my son, well, porn usage is not a great thing. It's normal to have those feelings. It's normal to want to masturbate. Um, so those were just the really practical things that I was just not any part of. Impractical things I was just not down with at the church. And I look back and I see all these things that I had problems with and think, why did I stay so long? The only thing I could think is I was just sort of brainwashed by everything that was going on. Almost everybody at the particular church I went to was a lapsed Catholic. We all were lapsed Catholics who are now beating ourselves up with the Holy Spirit. Everything was a sin. Especially the stuff that was no sin at all. That was the funny thing. We would have these long meetings about destroying your idols. What was an idol in your life that was holding you back? And I ended up confessing to any number of really stupid things that I'm kind of like hitting myself in the head now for. So once you educate yourself about the narc and their ways, they're a complete joke, satanic joke, but a joke nonetheless. You are right. You were absolutely right. There have been a number of narcs in my life that I've had to deal with, and some of them through church, but not the pastor. I've got to say that. He has his own issues, poor thing. It could also be inertia. It's easier to stick with the status quo than to change it. Java man, that could be. Plus, and about the burning in hell, that could be it. Plus, when my husband and I had joined the church, it was just a standard small town evangelical Baptist kind of church where it was pretty standard. They didn't say anything that was too horribly toxic at first. I'd say the first 3 or 4 years we were there, it was pretty standard. Now there was it's a sin over things like modesty, but it didn't really go into hyperdrive until a little later. It looked like the inmates had seized the asylum and were running it the way they wanted. And there were some very good moments there, but there was mostly just a whole lot of just extremely weird that started happening. And some of the weird was so weird, I just couldn't, and I couldn't conceive of leaving because if I left, there goes my support system, there goes all my friends, there goes everything for me. And I had the kind of support system like when I had to have some surgeries, including a hysterectomy. People showed up with food for the family. They fed the family so I could recover. They fed the family and would bring things. I remember one time I had to have a sudden DNC, and a girlfriend showed up with a bottle of wine and a big bar of the best chocolate. I had another girlfriend show up with fuzzy socks for me. I mean, the best. I loved those people, loved them. So when they turned on me, and I knew they would turn on me, it was a shock. I only have really one really good friend that I've been able to maintain my friendship with all these years. Interestingly enough, some of the ones that threw the worst rocks at me have now come around, have been through their own version of that, and showed up at the Methodist church where we were going, just broken. And I was able to talk to and minister to a number of them. So that was good. That doesn't mean I would ever trust any of them again. One of them tried to come here, and I pretty much discouraged her in my emails. Well, one always hopes for the best in any situation. Sometimes that belief is enough, but then the dots get connected and the lights come on. Melly Lynn, no, my children were not of age when we left. They were still in their teens. They were still in their teens, and it took them a while to deconvert. It took us all a while to deconvert. Therapy, therapy, therapy. That's all I can say. That works. I can say that. Interestingly enough, both kids are complete atheists now, even though I still maintain a faith, but it's very different than what I went through. And I have days where I think, yeah, screw all that. I'm an atheist. I have those days too. Hey, Renelle, I have those days. And I think we all do. We're going to have those days where we're kind of on that continuum where we don't know where we are. And it's a long time to deconvert from that kind of dangerous religion. I'm hoping now that Josh is in jail that he'll be able to get some kind of therapy through the jail. I mean, he will never be able to overcome the kind of thing he's involved in now. They say that people who are child molesters are like child porn that never goes away, that they always have that desire, even if they're chemically castrated. So he'll need to be on the registry if he ever gets out. And I don't think he'll ever get out. Well, let me rephrase that. I don't think he's going to get away with a short sentence. I think it's going to be a long sentence, 10 years or so. He is going to probably go to Tucson, where they have a lot of those child molesters and others involved in child porn at that one particular federal jail. They have to put them all together to protect them, unfortunately. Now, some of the kids can be helped, I'm sure. The ones that are at home now with Jim Bob and Michelle, there's no helping them because they're all still involved in that same religion with the same thoughts, the same thing that teaches that all thoughts of sexuality, all regular development, all of that is a sin. They're all involved in that skill. Now, the ones that are older and they're out of the household, that are married, there's always hope for them. But here's the thing. You remember I was talking about how difficult it was for me to leave, and I wasn't even raised in it. I'd been raised Catholic by people who I would say are borderline atheists, because it was like for them was Marian, burying, Christmas, and Easter only. But I got sent anytime the church was open. So there's that. So I think when you're raised in it, it's a lot harder to leave. There are a lot of organizations where the second gen kids that have left these cult churches have run that would be more fitting to help them than anybody else. I'm trying to think. Homeschoolers Anonymous used to be very active and help people who were merging. There's CRHE, I think it's they help homeschoolers who are leaving, who have been through that. They help them reiterate and heal. There's survivor stories at all of those websites of second gen. And it's going to have to be the second geners that help the adult Duggar children that are getting out. I mean, I look at Derek and Jill. Now, granted, they still hold some pretty regressive ideas about sexuality as far as homosexuality, but they're on that journey I was talking about that does like this. It's not linear. It's not like this. It's this. They're on that journey. And I think they need the space to complete that. I think she may be able to, Jill will have influence in her siblings' lives, especially now that they're too old for Jim Bob to be controlling every thought, word, and deed. Derek and Jill will have a lot of ability to speak into that. And it makes me very sad, but I think that the only thing that's really going to help is therapy. Therapy will help if it's for all those kids. That's really what they're going to have to do. And some children will stay with it. Some children will fall away. Just knowing the number of children that fall away and don't continue, I would say that down the line, we're going to see a lot of Duggar children fall away. I'm curious to see who writes the first tell-all book, because it's coming. Somebody is going to do that. And because whoever the first one is, they're the ones that are going to get the big book deal and all the money. It won't be the subsequent ones that come out. So the resources to help them. Like I said, Homeschoolers Anonymous would be very helpful. The Coalition for Responsible Home Education would help them. There are therapists. I don't know what kind of therapy options exist in that part of Arkansas. I would think that a clinical social worker who's in practice in that area would be able to help them. And there will be places that's what they specialize in. I mean, people and places that specialize in that. Then there are actually good Christian counselors that can help you deconvert from these things. I had one for quite some time. Yeah, I had one, and that's what's going to take. Like I said, I think Jill and Derek are going to be crucial in the coming years into helping their siblings. And it'll be interesting to see how many of their siblings pull away now that they've heard the truth of what was done and how their parents minimized what Josh was doing and lied about it. I think that was probably eye-opening for Joy and Austin and other Duggar kids that came there who thought they were coming there to support the family, but actually heard. Hopefully that not only they can hear, but there'll be enough of a kernel of truth in it that they'll recognize that it is the truth, and it will cause them to start thinking. You know, people ask me all the time, at what point did you start thinking that it was wrong? At what point did you pull the thread and the whole thing unraveled? And I'm still thinking about that. I've said many times it was the time that we went through Neil T. Anderson's The Bondage Breakers, and I asked about yoga because they said I had to repent from yoga, and I said, but why? I've done yoga for years. With Lily S. Yoga and she actually dedicated her book to Jesus and talked about Christianity and other religions when she was teaching yoga. And I couldn't understand why they would think that yoga would be chanting demons' names and stuff. For me, that was the very beginning. I'm praying that for the Duggar kids, that hearing how badly their parents mishandled this whole thing through the courtroom is going to be the thing that starts the thread unraveling. Once that starts happening, it is really hard to ignore your own thoughts. You start thinking, well, if that's true, then this must be true. And it's this long chain of events that you start thinking this is all BS and I've got to get out of here. If I'm going to continue to live my life, I've got to get out of here or I'm going to die. When you get to that point, that's when you start leaving. And knowing resources is a good way. It's a really good way. I'm going to put links to the CRAG, Homeschoolers Anonymous, and I forgot what the name of the other organization is. Now, it's highly litigious. He'll try to block any books or anything. I'm sure he will. And I think Derek will be that first tell-all book. I really think so. I hate to say it, but I think it's going to be Derek. Oh, come on. Okay, let is remove all of your BS. Okay, so there is that. He's very litigious. He's not real smart. I'm just going to say that. He's not real book smart. He can tell him all the stuff that, I mean, you can tell by the stuff he does in how he tries to do things. When I was writing for NLQ, there was a time there that any time that I ever used a picture that came from TLC or one of the Duggars like their social media, you know what would happen? Pathos would get a cease and desist. It would get a copyright strike. And this idiot is still trying to spam. Love face, you can continue, but guess what? You are not able to put any of that out there. We're removing everything. Go on with your bad self. I was raised in a legalistic religion. Thank God for my husband. He was raised in normal Christianity. I went into counseling our first year of marriage. He went with me because I was so afraid. Yeah, that is so awesome that he could see that. My husband drugged me out by my hair almost. He left. That's how I left. And I've talked about this before because I was told to leave my husband. He drugged me out by my hair in some ways because he said, I'm leaving for the Methodist church. You're free to stay here, you and the kids. And I said, okay, we'll stay here. People at church started to attack me and ask me why my husband had left for those homosexual love and abortionists, the Methodist. That's what they called them. And I said, that's what he feels called to do. That's what he feels like he needs to do. And they started harassing me. They started telling me that if I was a better wife, if I'd have been submissive, if I'd been more submissive, if I'd have been praying enough, if I'd have been this, if I'd have been that, my husband would not have left. Quiverfull would have changed him. He would be a good guy. He wouldn't be struggling with things for years and years and years like depression. I was told that so many times it was unbelievable. So they started to harass me. And while the harassment was going on in my prayer time, I kept hearing from God that I needed to leave. Especially one time I was rehearsing a new song. And I don't even remember what the name. It was like, the chorus was something like, you're enough for me. And hearing, and I'll be enough for you when you go to the Methodist church. I didn't want to hear that. So I dallied a little longer. The harassment got worse. Finally, I've talked about it before. I hit a breaking point one Sunday where the pastor said that I could no longer host home group in our town because my husband was now going to church with a bunch of homosexual, abortion-loving Methodists. So I said, fine. It was a hassle anyway. And he told the church's biggest gossip. I saw it happening. I was on the platform rehearsing for Sunday morning worship. I saw straight down the hallway that he was talking to the church's biggest gossip, who proceeded to come into the church and tell everybody sitting in the pews about it, to the point where he said it to people right behind my teenage daughter, who started weeping copiously. I could hear it from on the platform. That was it for me. I was gone. That was my last Sunday there. I left. We left and we didn't look back. That was it. But my former friends ramped up the harassment in our little small town. I was constantly dealing with them coming after me, saying nasty things, starting rumors. It was just ugly. It was ugly. And it was painful. It was the most painful thing I've ever experienced. Well, now I think he probably will, but I think he's picking his timing. I think that he's probably compiling everything. I think he will because he's quite litigious. I think he will go after her. And I know KJ was trying to horn in on that documentary. When the documentary was just in the first talking about stages, I did a lengthy interview with them of like an hour or 90 minutes, whatever. I don't know if it'll ever be shown because at that point they were talking about they wanted to look at the IBLP, the pros and the cons. They wanted to have people from both sides and they were talking to me about the cons. And I was telling them everything I knew about it in great detail. And we weren't IBLP at my old church. I knew a lot of people that followed them at the church, but it wasn't official. And towards the end, we went straight out in the outer space over so many things that the IBLP would have thrown up over. We do think he will eventually hit with cease and desist. I'm not entirely sure. I keep hearing that he's hit her with a cease and desist before. I don't know how true that is. That's something I've heard a bunch. I don't think he wants to draw attention to her channel either. It's like he didn't want to draw attention to NLQ, so he would go through Pathos and hit with the strike. He's not like the female cultural enforcer whose husband keeps trying to reach out and smack me, who went so far as to try to reach out to my husband to tell me to behave. If you want to laugh, one day I'll read his email and share it. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen because he was telling my husband to control me. As a good Christian man, control your wife. Honey, I am done with that. I am done with that. I am hoping so, Laura S. I heard through the grapevine that the Duggars may be coming for her now the trial's over. Rena Rue, that's what I keep hearing. I think I think Laura's right. I think once his energy and resources are freed up, I think eventually he will come for her. I think it's going to happen. You can't say those things. Christine, I did. I warned them about her. Now, whether they'll use her or not, I don't know. Renelle, anytime. I even have a U.S. phone number if you want that. Just hit me up on Twitter and I'll send it to you. If you want to have a phone call, we can do that. You could ask all your questions and I'll answer them if I have answers at all. Like I said, I don't know everything in this world. I don't pretend to know everything in this world, even though that's one of the things I get accused of frequently. You think you're a know-it-all. I'm not a know-it-all. I'm pretty expert in the field of Quiverfull and cult religions and how damaging the theology is. And there's a body count. I can tell you there's a body count to all this. That's the thing that none of them talk about. There's a huge body count to this. I know women who are dead now because of Quiverfull. And what happens is the husband has this girl. He gets a new model. He gets a much younger model. And it just continues on. It's just pretty crazy. KJ has already been talking to you about people making the documentary. I'm thinking she's already been exposed. I think that they're not going to, I think it's going to be very problematic if they use her. I mean, did you see that there's a documentary out about the Gabby Petito case that cites the dad challenge and not her? It's got to be killing her. That, Emily D. Baker being on ABC's special on the New Year, that's got to be killing her. Emily D. Baker rounding her, getting closer and closer to passing her in subs has got to be killing her. I'm sure that they're in Minnesota between that and what I think are likely strikes. It's got to be killing her. And there's been some legal discussions here, including about striking the video where she used my entire life story for her leaving her quote cult church. I've thought about doing that because I certainly have enough resources to show that she got that from my writings at NLQ and what I've said here. I don't know, Java Man. We need to come up with a betting pool, I think. Kind of like, those football pools where you say, I think blah, 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 blah. Well, this will say, I think 18 lawsuits by January the 30th, whatever. Let's cast lots about it. I was just hearing about that yesterday in a sermon. Somebody was talking about them casting lots for Jesus's robe. Let's cast lots. And over under, we could do that too. She's certainly been on the defensive with her followers. Emily D. Baker's credibility and resume blows KJ out of the water. Can't wait for the sub count to roll over KJ. She, yes, Anna, she did. She did a video about leaving her cult church. She used my words, word for word. She said they told her to divorce her husband because her husband was eager to leave first. She talked about being a 5%er. Bobby, recaps with Bobby the black cat, did a video where he compared a few points of my story, her story, head to head, and showed that she had lifted it from me. She used my story. She used my life story. Copyright strikes. Yes. She used it. Mostly I've been almost laughing over most of her shenanigans because I'm so glad I'm not dealing with her anymore at Pathos. That was very difficult. The year that I dealt with her, there was not a good year in a lot of ways. I had just had a stroke. I was trying to recover. She was constantly PMing with questions. And there are a lot of people at Pathos that were introduced to me when they first came on. And the editor said, Suzanne's been here a long time. You can ask her your questions. She'll help you, blah, blah, blah. And most of the times like, hi. And that was it. And there are a couple of people that asked me a question or two. There were a couple of people I helped successfully launch. But never in my wildest dreams did I ever imagine I was going to have to spend so much time with one person and listen to so many baseless, stupid complaints. It was her. It is incredibly offensive. Yes, she has spoken to me about they didn't help them financially. They didn't help them practically with the child, whose name I'm not going to say. That was her reason for leaving. And she's given that in other videos she's done about her leaving her church. She said that. So this is not just me pulling this out of thin air. She has stated this a number of times, and it was at her Pathos blog too. So she has said this so many times now. So I was really shocked that she made one video where she used my life story about leaving her church, right down to saying that they told her to divorce her husband. And when Bobby put those two videos head to head, and it wasn't even the only time I ever told that story. So she got some details from other retellings of my life story that Bobby did not pick up on, but I was gobsmacked. After I stopped dealing with her, I didn't think about her much. Every now and then I'd hear from her, oh yeah, how you doing? Then we knocked heads when Homeland Security showed up and investigated Josh because we were both hearing from unnamed Duggar insiders what was going on. What we knew is it was law enforcement. We both knew that. We just couldn't figure out which branch of law enforcement and what they were looking for. And because it was federal, I started speculating, looking at what Homeland Security usually prosecutes. There were a variety of things it could have been. I also think I can talk about the people helping with the documentary, how I dislike her. That could be. So normally it is. Yeah. So she did completely steal my story. Mouth on fire because she couldn't tell the truth and was on fire. Well, I suspect she's, and the next time she takes anything of mine, I'm gonna copyright strike her from now on. Is what I'm gonna do, because this is just wrong. And I'm trying to work on my book. I'm telling some of these stories here. I'm telling some of them in great detail in the book, explaining about things that most people don't know about: holy laughter, speaking in tongues, all the crazy things like fire tunnels we used to do, all the things that I look back now and say, it's just comforting ourselves. We were playing games, comforting ourselves. So she uses that stuff. Oh, no, damn good and well, she's stealing from me again. And I'm going to hit her with copyright strikes every single time she does. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. So anyway, during the Duggar thing with the investigation by Homeland Security, she started using some things that I told her in confidence. She's used something I told her about which Duggar kids went to which ATI Gothard linked Pray the Gay Away camps. She's used stuff like that I've known, I've gotten from other people. I said, hey, blah, blah, blah. Don't say anything. But she has not just used it, she's extrapolated it out to a place that it would never was. So she's taken these little kernels of truth and turned them into complete untruth. And Yeah, a Spanish major that can't even speak Spanish. El stupido. Senora idiota, Catherine. Yeah, so that always makes me laugh. And I only speak poquito Spanish. I speak enough to get around here, but not in any. I didn't study Spanish except one semester in school. And I still think I speak more and better Spanish than her. But anyway, back to that. She took so many things that I shared in confidence many moons back and started to make money off of them, started to share them. And there were things that I would not share publicly. I would not put in writing or on a video because I'm a big believer if the kid is under 18, they deserve privacy. I mean, even writing my book, I'm not naming my children. I'm just saying my son, my daughter. And I'm explaining that's because my son and daughter deserve their own privacy. I don't really want to out them on who they are, their names, or where they're living now. And because we're not living in the same place we did, our small town. So it's pretty relatively safe not to name them and say, anyway. So she did that. She used all my stuff. And so I said, I'm going to get back at her. I'm going to write a piece and use everything she said. I did. And she went off on me. So we stopped speaking to each other. And I blocked her yet again because I would block her every now and then when she was stressing me out. She was stressing me out right then. And that was also when the Olive Heiligenthal thing was going on with Bethel, which was really stressing me out because I knew Bethel well. Bethel was another church that my church was very highly involved with. So she was stressing me out so bad. I just went ahead and just blocked her in all ways, shapes, and forms. And she did like she always did. She came up with a new name and came around again. She does have difficulty with English. Es un tonta tremendioso. So somebody called the anti-community the funniest name the other day. They said they were the counterballs. And I think that's such a clever name. So that's really when we had our first falling out was then. And then she wanted me to come on and talk with her about the Duggars on her video. And she'd been talking about this so many times. I said, okay, yeah, whatever. She scheduled me and stood me up without telling me she was standing me up after we'd talked about it a bunch of times. After I'd told my readers and she'd told her people. She stood me up without a word and then blocked me. And then had the nerve to say, oh, well, I talked to Suzanne. It's all good now. I talked to her. We're friends again. I apologize. And we're friends. I've yet to hear from that person, except one time when we were having a conversation somewhere where she couldn't block me. And I said, you need to apologize to me. She said, I've apologized to you many times. You're so toxic, blah, 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 blah. I was like, whatever. So I've given up. So what was the word? She annihilated pro hac vice. Yeah, she doesn't know Latin words at all. And I've kind of laughed about some of her pronunciations for years with these things. I'm not going to mention the person, but there's somebody fighting with another person. They're having like Clash of the Titans right now. I don't like either creator anymore. They're both males. They're one of them also does these incredibly bizarre mispronunciations, and he doesn't know a lot of words. And I feel kind of sorry for him. I feel like he needs to be a little more educated before he goes out and starts to tell anybody how to do anything. She is an interesting psychological specimen. I think she's a narc. I think she's a narcissist. That's just my personal opinion. But she's done so many of these things. And so I was just mostly just amused by her behavior for most of that time, except she stood me up and I was like, okay, I'm over this. I'm going along. Then Steve and others started showing me she'd been plagiarizing me for a long time. And once I realized that, I kind of lost it. I went off on her and then kind of stayed off to the side after that and was just supportive of everybody in the anti-community and was pretty anti myself, but not like a lot of people. Then I discovered that she had used my life story of leaving the cult. She used the entire thing. She used various parts of it in its entirety at different places and shamelessly used it. And I lost my mind then too. I was so angry, so angry. You just don't even know. And then to discover days ago she had used some other stuff, I was so angry again. I laugh but but at the time, my blood pressure went way up, way up. So I try to be more amused than angry over things, but I lost it earlier in this week on New Year's Eve because of this, and it just kind of colored the whole day for me. I finally just gave up and went to bed around 10. Just said, the hell with it. I'm done with this day. I'm done with New Year's Eve. I'm done with her again. I'm going to have to talk to legal and think about striking her because this is just getting ridiculous. Ridiculous. Readeroo, it is an old name that I used to use during my time with my cult. I love the name. I could tell you a little story. It's a cute little story. We used to have this husband and wife. They came from Africa. They came from Kenya, actually, to minister at our church every now and then. We used to support them. We do on mission trips there and stuff. And I love the two of them. The man's name was John. I forgot what the wife's name is. But the man's name was John. And he used to just say the funniest stuff and throw in the African words. And he used to say sometimes when things were all mixed up and crazy, that's Okululu. Well, I'm always kind of mixed up and crazy sometimes too. So I always feel that way. A lot of times I feel like I'm going all over the place with my ADD. And I am sometimes. So I heard him say that and I said, I'm stealing that name. And I use that name forever. I used it in my blog. I used it, my public email address, and not really using it so much anymore for what I'm doing. But it's kind of a shout back to my time towards the end of my years in that cult church. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. It was such a bad feeling. It was, yeah, I can't even imagine. And that's the thing I want to leave you with today. Her behavior, the things she says, the things she does, have real life consequences. They harm people. And I'm not even talking about my blood pressure going up and losing my mind a couple times. I am talking about the kind of real life, real world consequences that she has earned by doing things like outing, which Duggar children may not line up with the sexuality promoted by the parents. Those kids' very existence is threatened with every time she tries to say that Jana is in one of those relationships. If Jim Bob truly believed that, it would not be just sending someone to a pray the gay away kind of segment. It would be throwing them out of the family, cutting off all support. And these are kids that were not raised to do jobs. They were not trained in any way, shape, or form, not even a basic kind of trade school thing. These are kids that know very little. Their educations are subpar. They don't know how to do much of nothing. So when she says these things, she harms them. When she steals people's stories, she harms them. When she makes these assertions about how things are in these cult churches, she harms everybody involved in those things. She makes it harder to get out. She makes it harder to recover. She triggers people. She could be triggering people to commit suicide for all we know. And that's the problem with what she's doing and saying. That is the real problem with making stuff up and just extrapolating out and shouting out everything you know. You could be doing untold harm. You could be costing people their lives. And those kids are traumatized. They are definitely traumatized. Whatever happens, they're always going to struggle until they go through the right kind of counseling. I'm convinced of it. She's now speculating that one of the Duggar boys is abusing his wife. Yes, and I know which one it is. And it's one that she thinks is gay. And she has speculated about that marriage since the beginning. Now, I have heard some things about that marriage through insiders about how it came about that makes it seem like it's not really the love connection it could be. And that may well be, but that may also just be BS that unnamed Duggar insiders are pushing because they don't like it for some reason. Because I've seen that too. That's why it's so important that every time you hear a rumor from a supposed insider, that you take it and you see if you can verify it in some way before you spread it, because you can't close the barn door after the animals are out. And if you're spreading something that's not true, that you cannot verify from at least 1 to 2 other sources, you're doing everybody harm. You just are. I truly hope the anti-community uses their power to let everybody know about her past. If they're thinking about making an honest doc, KJ is dangerous. She is dangerous. She's dangerous. That's the problem. She puts these kids and many other their lives in danger by this. And I hate talking about her. I'm just sick to death about talking about her because I want other content. I don't want to have to talk about her. I want to just continue to talk about Quiverfull and my experiences and how to recover from this, to hit recovery things, because the recovery is the hard part. The believing is not the hard part. It's leaving and recovering. It's dealing with the triggers that come. Like I said, one time I found myself leaving a Mennonite store, throwing up in the bushes because I heard the song, Now's the time to worship. And I just splashed on a trigger. And the next thing I know, I was gagging. I mean, those are the things that happens. And by her talking about these things, she minimizes it. She minimizes our experiences and she turns them into something they are not. She turns them into fodder for dollars, clicks, and coins. And for me, that is just too much. I just can't. I just can't any longer. So I'm not trying to get emotional, but it's happening because the more I think about this, the more I'm getting there, and I don't want to be there. It's a place I don't want to be. If Jenna and Laura were in a relationship, does KJ really think Laura would be allowed on the Duggar property? She wouldn't be. She would not be. Jim Bob would control that. He controls that. He's the puppet master. I do think that a lot of their relationships are arranged. They're arranged. Absolutely, Renaroo. Because in that type of theology, the father is king. He picks out who marries whom. And there's no way you could ever have a courtship with someone who is not parent approved, unless there's somebody like Jill Rodriguez, who apparently is just taking whoever comes. The only exception to that was when Timothy, their oldest son, had a relationship when he was in some kind of technical college, bought a promise ring or an engagement ring for a girl there that he was involved in. And supposedly David and Jill showed up and ended it because that was not their choice for him. And they brought him back home again. But in Duggartown, those kids are so tightly controlled that they have no opportunity to have relationships that would lead to marriage outside of the family. And that's the other thing that's wrong with this kind of theology. It's such a closed loop that the only people that you're allowed to interact with are in your group. Why do you think they were going to such lengths to force me to behave and rejoin the group? Because that's what they do. Nobody is allowed to leave. Nobody is allowed to have independent thought. It's just how they run it, and it's the worst. It really is. Java Man, you're right about that. I think that stops Jim Bob from publicly going against Jill and Derek, and publicly going against cousin Amy. I think that's it. Yeah, it is awful, Melly. It just is. She has taken all of that. I'm guessing Jim Bob is regretting choosing Derek. Yes. And I always say that he bought Ben Seawall for Jessa because look at how Ben has just abandoned school and everything to be a worker on Jim Bob's plantation. Think about that one for a minute. Oh, Lord, I've been here 90 minutes almost. I'm going to have to go. I've got to get on with my day. We were supposed to have guests here today. I was supposed to go to Liberia and pick people up at the airport, but their flight got canceled. I'm not entirely surprised because, as you well know, flights are getting canceled left and right. I'm glad I didn't buy a ticket to go see my mother. I was supposed to for January, but that fell through. Flights are being canceled. So, hallelujah, I got another day to make sure my house is perfectly clean. Now I can go out and clean the deck and feel unhurried and unrushed. So that's really what I want to do. My poor husband's been waiting for me for 90 minutes to wrap this up so that he and I could go run some errands. Okay, you guys, I got to go feed my neighbor's cats.